Hello, and welcome back to the Growing Wild Studios YouTube channel. My name is Cindy, and I'm the maker here on this channel. Today, I am going to be trying out the Red Heart Granny Square all-in-one yarn. The concept behind this yarn is really that instead of with a traditional Granny Square, where if you want to change color, you have to change the yarn, cut ends, weave ends in at the end, with this, as you crochet, the color changes are happening naturally. So there's not as many ends to weave in, it takes a little bit less time, etc., etc. It's been on the market for a little while, and I have seen other people testing it out. So I have a little bit of an idea of how it works out. And basically what those videos say and what kind of my thoughts are going into it is that this idea and this concept is really based on the tension of the person using it. And tension can be such a personal thing. You can be really tight, you can be really loose, and there's not a lot of room for wiggle room in this type of yarn skeins. So I'm going in a little bit skeptical, but knowing that, it's something that once you do it once, it's easy to see how it goes and change your tension to be tighter or looser, and kind of going in with an open mind, but knowing it might not work out due to that very personal nature of tension. I did also pick up the newer version, which is the Flower Power. It's got a flower in the middle instead of the usual granny motif. And I really just wanted to see if between when the first one released and the second, the Flower Power, I wanted to see if they took into account, the different experiences of the people online, people who left reviews, their customers. And just see, if it varies between the first and the second, on if the tension, really makes so much of a difference. So I'm going to get into it. I know that there are very specific instructions on the back of the labels. So I will see you very soon when I'm ready to get started. All right, here we are. Like I said, we're going to start with the original version. And to confirm, this is the Hot Stuff colorway. Let's get to it. Okay, so, all of this is basically the instructions for, how to make this, this vest. That is kind of upsetting, because I might not want to make this vest, but this is a yarn that's a little bit different, and there is no there's no good instructions on how to use it. I think I'm gonna have to go online. The only thing that I can see is that right here there is like a chart. Let me see if I can bring it closer. Yeah, there's like a chart with like, these are like the legend, which, is helpful, so to speak, but at the same time, like, I've heard through other videos and like I can see how like if you use a 4-inch tail, or if you have a 3-inch tail, or if you have a 6-inch tail, like that's gonna affect how these go too. So I'm not super happy about this so far. I'll meet you again once I look some things up online. I went to the Yarn Inspirations website, and they kind of have some help, and they kind of don't. So basically, after stating what you need, which is also stated on the label because it still says the weight and what size yarn hook you need, this calls for a 5.5, which is what I'm going to start with. Basically, they say start with a 4-inch tail, which was helpful because that was not on the belly band. But then they just provided the same stitch key, and just said, follow these instructions, which is not really instructions. I feel that stitch keys are something that is more I don't want to say advanced, but it's not, it depends on how you learn. Like some people learn off of stitch keys, some people learn off patterns, some people just, know how to create items based on different stitches. So I'm not super happy that this is the only instructions they gave, because the point of having an online video, which I will link below, is that if like it's a different sort of resource. So instead of a written pattern, which might not be the best way for some people, there is a video to go along with it. Or something else. So basically it feels like they put out this key is the only instructions you get, and then there's some helpful hints that we'll talk about when we get there, basically, because I have a feeling I'm going to go into it. So I'm already a little bit annoyed that there's only one form of instruction and people throughout the world have different forms of learning. So here we go. The other helpful thing that the video did say that it has to be a center pull in order to kind of work correctly. So that was that was good to know. That would have been good to know on the yarn ball. I can see the change in my yarn. I have 2 double crochets plus a slip stitch to go. And I think we might actually do it. Oh my god. I'm shocked. I spoke too soon. Yeah. Okay. So I am just about to finish. This is the end of my first that's the end of my second crochet. Second double crochet, and really this first chain 3 counts as the third double crochet of this cluster. So I have 1, 2 stitch, and then these 3 chains count as the last. So it's pretty close. I am gonna undo this. I'm also not super happy with how this corner looks. I want it to look a little bit neater. So I'm going to pull this back. No, this isn't going to do it either. It's going to be exactly the same thing as before. Yeah, no. Okay. Okay. Am I going to go down to a 5? I think that I am. I think I want to go down to a 5mm hook just to see, rather than, having a super tight tension. Let's just see if that works instead. Okay, and now we have the opposite problem, which is that I've got a little bit extra here. I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know if I'm ever gonna grab this again. Okay, I'm just gonna keep going for now just to see how it goes. I don't even want to do that. Okay, I'm not gonna keep going. I'm gonna rip it back. And maybe I'm gonna be a little looser just because this feels, I don't like having it in the wrong spot, basically. No, okay. Yeah, this last crochet is kind of loose. I'm gonna come back. Okay. So then this one's kind of a little bit tighter. Nope, absolutely not. Okay, that's even more frustrating. I'm gonna pull this back just here because I can't do this for another time and I'm really frustrated. Okay, that works a little bit better. I'm gonna do a slip stitch And I'm okay with that. Okay. Perfect. Okay. We have made it happen. Look at that. Beautiful. Okay. I'm okay with this. We're going to move on to the next row. And if you don't know, basically, we're going to keep going. Chain 3 to bring up the extra row, or to chain 3 to bring it up the row, chain 3 through the corner, and then in each of the spaces, we're going to put, so these are the corner spaces, we're going to put 2 in each space, okay? So I'm going to go ahead with that, and we're going to see how it goes. All right, we are coming to our last set of our last cluster of 3. And I have not seen the end of this yet, which is kind of weird. Okay, there it is. That's a lot of yarn for 2 stitches. Yeah. Let's see how this goes. Yeah, just as I thought. Now that's way too much. Okay. Yeah. Even with a chain 3, this is not acceptable. Yeah. No, it doesn't even get a chain 3 because it just slip stitches up here. I am gonna pull this row back again. And I was kind of tight on this. I think I'm going to be a little bit looser. Okay, so it's happened again, and I've already redone this square so many times that I simply don't care to go back and do this section again. But this is what it's looking like. I am really not liking what it looks like in these kind of corners here, where, you know, I have to, like I'm going into the corner, but because this piece is connected right here in the corner, like I have to go over it. It just feels very bulky. It doesn't look good. And I, quite frankly, I just don't like it. But that's also part of the reason I'm like, I don't give a crap that much that this red has started here, because I'm going to have to chain over it again, or go over it again anyway. So, if you could not tell, this is already not my favorite. I think I'm just going to shut off or do a little like time lapse of the rest of it, because I think you get the gist that what I said in the intro is kind of true, where it just is so personal to your tension. I am using, I used the recommended size, the 5.5, and I was coming up low. I'm using one lower, the 5 size, and it's still coming up low in different manners. So quite frankly, I just want to get through this. So I think for the most part, there are 5 rows total. So there's this red, there's this pink, and it ends on the white. I'm just going to get through this because I think the issue is just basically going to be the same. So I'm going to get through this, and I will meet you at the end of this square. Okay, so I have gotten to the end of this granny square. And I have a lot of feelings, a lot of big feelings. I've talked about some of these throughout, but I think, okay, let's start at 1. This kind of row here is where you're chaining 3 as your start for this previous granny cluster, and then you're chaining 3 for the corner and starting this in the corner. I think this is one of my bigger problems because it doesn't look good. You can tell that this 100% is where you're starting around, ending around, whatever. Second, you can also kind of see that every row is just a little bit short. You can see a little purple here. You can see a little red here. You can see a little pink here. You can see a little white here. And at the very end, you can see the dark purple at the very beginning for the next one again. And that is frustrating. And for these rows, I've ripped back and redid it 3, maybe 4 times. The last 3, the pink, red, and white, or the red, pink, and white, I did only 2 times. And I cannot be a person who can rip it back and do it again multiple times if the point of this yarn is that it's supposed to save you time. I'll save kind of the rest of my thoughts and simmer on it for the exit or the outro. But I am not going to do the second flower power one today. I am going to give it its fair due. So I'm going to come back tomorrow for the flower power, after a good night's rest, after a fresh mind. So I will see y'all tomorrow for this next one. Well, hello. Today we're back to try the second ball, see how it goes. I did take a look at the belly band yesterday after finishing the first one, just to see what was different. And this belly band is much different. So instead of having a pattern, this one has an actual pattern for the motifs itself, plus a much larger stitch chart, which is great because in comparison, it's like a quarter of the size. So that was good to see. I did check out the website with the instructions again, and they're just as bad. They basically say, yep, use the 4-inch tail, pull from the center, and then use the belly band pattern, which is better this time. So I'll give them that at least. And I don't know if it's me. These words are really tiny. So I found myself in going through it last night. I found that it was a little bit hard to follow, but we're going to persevere. We're going to see how it goes. Even though I've never done the flower, motif before, I'm a little more excited for this one. So we're going to see how it goes. Yeah, let's get to it. Join, and that is supposed to be the end of the first color. Wow, that's horrible. Look how much I have left right here. So doing that seemed to work. I've got this little white piece right here, which again is part of the reason it's not my favorite. I wish they just extended the orange some more. But you know what? I'm set to start on the yellow right now, and that works. Okay, so let's keep going. Color to complete. Okay, so same thing. We have a crap ton of extra yarn. That's a problem. I really don't want to undo that all and do it again. I just really don't. Ugh, this is a nightmare. The flower's cute though. I will give them that. Am I gonna undo it? Yeah, I don't really have a choice. Here we go. That makes me really unhappy again. I have a feeling I'm gonna be super loose at the beginning, and then I'm gonna be kind of tight at the back, which is kind of what ended up happening yesterday with the regular granny motif. So I'm a little peeved by this, because that's also not the point, of crochet. Like, you're supposed to have even tension throughout. In order for your product to work, you have to have weird tension throughout because people have lost patience with ripping things out 100 times. Then I don't know how good your product is. Maybe. It feels like an eternal game of yarn chicken. Like, every time I need to get to a new color, which is like on the first original version, like every round. So every 5 rounds you're playing yarn chicken. And like with this one, it's not every round. There's only 3 colors in 6 rounds. But it still feels like, oh crap, I need to make sure I'm getting there. And okay, so here's what happened. I'm gonna pull back a little bit. So this one has more of a gradual color shift, which I think is helping it out a little bit. And it's happening on this last double crochet, which means basically when I get here, it's on the blue, which I think isn't the worst thing in the world. Because at the end, like, that's the end of the flower. Who's to say if it should be, I mean, it probably would look better if it was yellow and not blue. I don't hate it. Like, like with the other one, I don't hate it, but I don't love it. But I'm definitely going to continue from here. So here is our Flower Power Granny Square. Let me adjust the focus just a little bit. This was a much less stressful process. So, okay, let's see. When does the color change? Oh Lord, yeah. Okay, look at how much I have extra. So I don't know if that's just because of my tension or if it's because, they left extra room, but like, seriously, there's gotta be at least a foot of extra. Yeah, there's at least 4 to 5 feet of additional yarn here, which is, I want to say, great in a sense of like, okay, so it's good and bad. It's great because it means at the very end here, like once you get to the blue, the feeling of like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, yarn chicken is gone. So that was good. And it gives you, like, if you are weaving them together, that should be plenty to definitely go down one side of the square, go maybe down a second side, and maybe go up another, which is actually kind of very cool. There's definitely some puckering going on. Like, you can see where every like half double cluster granny is. I don't like this corner. This looks horrible. I would like it better if this double, like this chain, just counted. Like, this is a hot mess of a corner. I hate it so much. But overall, this Flower Power one was definitely a way more pleasurable experience. All right, I have finished both of the squares. And here they are. Here, we'll get the string out of the way. Here they are. I usually want to say I'm really happy with them. And while I'm happy with like kind of how they look for the most part, I was not happy with this experience. As y'all saw, it was extremely frustrating. So starting with the original, the Granny Square traditional motif, it was frustrating to have to rip back and redo so many times when this is advertised as something that is very easy. Don't worry about ends, just keep going. Especially since I had to rip this one back so many times to have to experience that to get it right. And while I don't think this was specifically marketed towards beginners, I can see how a beginner or a little bit of an advanced beginner might reach for this and not understand why it's not working out for them. So this is a project that relies heavily on tension, like I mentioned in the intro, and someone who is brand new or pretty new to this might not understand that if they have too little yarn, they might need to go down a hook size or have a tighter tension. They might not understand that if you have a ton of extra yarn before the color change, you might need to go up a hook size or loosen your tension. And that was something that I knew as a more advanced crocheter, and it is mentioned in the Yarnspirations video. But those videos were 2 to 3 minutes long and quite frankly, not very informative. Which kind of gets me into the instruction side of things. So on the original belly band, it has all of this writing, which the whole pattern up top is really just for the pattern on the front. It is not for the motif. And that could potentially be because the granny square motif is something that a lot more people know about. It's something that you might be able to look up online from other creators. But to me, it was frustrating if I'm a beginner and I'm picking this up, I want to have easy instructions for how to create the motif, how I'm supposed to use the yarn, etc. And I did look up the videos on the Yarnspiration website, and quite frankly, they were very disappointing. Other than 2 pieces of information that were helpful, which was you must start with a 4-inch tail and you must pull from the center in order for the color to work out. They were not helpful. They told me basically to use the belly band as instructions. And on the original granny square motif, this very small, very tiny 1-inch square chart is the only instructions on the actual motif itself. And quite frankly, Yarnspirations is a large established company, and this felt like a very cheap cop-out. I have a hard time believing that you don't have the money to pay someone to do a video tutorial. I have a hard time believing you neglected to put the instructions on this belly band. And I was really frustrated at it. And even though the granny square motif is more popular, as a beginner, as what is, called an all-in-one yarn, I expect it to be a lot easier to do. So even as like a seasoned crocheter, this was a very frustrating project to me. On the other side of things, with the newer Flower Power motif, they made some improvements for sure. Starting with the belly band. So all of this writing on this belly band is actually instructions for the motif, which was a great step up. They also made the stitch chart, a 2x2 square. And even though it's only 1 inch bigger, it makes a huge difference. And having the written instructions was helpful as well. The video for Flower Power, again, did not include an actual video tutorial. They referred you to the belly band. So again, I was very disappointed in that. But they did make a larger effort to make it easier to understand, potentially because a flower is not usually, I'm going to say not usually, it's not as popular or well known within the crochet community on how to do it off the top of your head. So that was good for sure. The second thing is that I believe that between the first Granny Square and then the second Flower Power, they listened to a lot of community members, both online and just people who purchased the yarn, and they gave a lot more room between the end of the yarn used for the end of the first motif and then the yarn starting for the next motif. And that was partially because people were like, hey, we want to put this together, we want to sew it together, and we have to buy more yarn in order to do so. That doesn't seem fair. And I think that's a fair critique. So basically, it felt like I only had to play Yarn Chicken twice with the 3 color changes. And then once I got to the blue, I knew I had tons of extra yarn. So overall, my experience with the Flower Power motif was a better experience than my one with the traditional Granny Square motif. So overall, what are my thoughts? I think I hesitate to call this a big miss because in some ways, I think it can be a really great experience. I don't think it's there yet. I think the concept works in general, and I think if this was marketed or made known to people that you need a little bit more of experience, then I think this would be, people would go into it with a different mindset, and maybe have a better experience overall. I think that they definitely need to work on their dye process, because there's a lot of bleeding happening, especially in this square. There's a lot of pinks left over. In the purple, there's like reds and purple and like, this deep maroon. And even there's a little bit of it happening in the blue over here. And that makes me sad. I don't want to say upset because it's not, the end of the world. But again, your inspiration is a large company. And I feel like they should be able to figure something like that out. I also think like they've made adjustments for the Flower Power belly band. I feel like those should be made on, the ones for the granny square traditional motif, because just because you release something one way doesn't mean it can't grow and evolve. And maybe it would be worth a shot for them to go back and reformulate how, the motif works up. I know that with the Flower Power, it only includes 12 total squares, and the granny square includes 14. And I think part of that is due to having additional extra yarn between the motifs. So that would be maybe it's something that they could improve upon with the granny square. Ultimately, I think it's a good idea that needs some work. As for me, am I going to be purchasing these again? And I think you can tell by my tone of voice in this whole video that the answer is a big ol' no. Quite frankly, I do not know if I am even going to finish these ones that I've purchased, which is why they are still attached to the balls and have not have any ends woven in. This experience was so frustrating that I'm considering frogging both of these, wrapping them up, taping the belly bands on, and donating them to my local secondhand craft store. I think it's more likely I might finish the flower one simply because it was a little bit easier to work with. I could easily make a bag with it. But ultimately, I will never be purchasing these again unless something very drastic changes about the formula and stuff like that. If you are going into it thinking I have 2 weeks to make, a couple of presents for the holidays, or I'm going in or go into it thinking like, okay, I have 2 days and I need to be able to make a bag for a birthday present. I don't know if that's the right mindset because it's going to take some time. It's said to be a time saver. It even says no color switching, keep on stitching on the belly band. And this certainly took me way more time to do than if I were to start and stop with different colors. So I think if you're interested just to see how it goes, and if it's poopy, then it's poopy. And if it's great, it's great. I think that's a great headspace to go into this with. But otherwise, I'm not sure if it's worth the time. I don't want to call it a gimmick. I think it could potentially have its place given some improvements on the formulas and stuff. But ultimately, if you want to try it, it should be a take it or leave it type of headspace. All right, here is a look at both of the squares one more time. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, even though it was a very frustrating process. It's a different side of me. But I hope you enjoyed seeing how it goes. I've got lots of other videos, including, a market prep vlog series, as well as me trying out other new to me crafts and things like that. I hope to see you over there. But if not, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!